I'll start introducing the fourth and last of our wonderful dialogues today, and we are very happy that we have two co-heads of the bachelor's program at the Royal Academy of the Arts in The Hague here. Thank you, Lotte Sprengers and John Fleetwood, for coming. And I will quickly, I will quickly just give a little bit of a background. Heide already mentioned this in the beginning, that there is this there was this collaboration that resulted in the site-specific installation we have here from students of your program, of your bachelor's program, and you had this field trip in March this year where all those works were made we see here today. So yeah, I think I don't want to expand it too much now, so you can just maybe introduce, give a little bit more information on what you were doing, what came out of this, and also then what you're doing in the Hague and at your faculty. So yes, we were happy that you invited your colleague Lotte to talk about those different aspects today, and also about the contents and goals of your photographic study program. I will quickly introduce each one of you before I give the floor to both of you. John Fleetwood is a curator and, as already mentioned, co-head of the bachelor's program of photography at the Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague since 2021, so since last year. Also, you're the director of Photo, which is a platform founded in Johannesburg for developing and promoting socially engaged and critical photography and visual culture, mainly working with emerging photographers. From 2002 till 2015, you directed the Market Photo Workshop in Johannesburg. And in 2017, you were guest editor of the Aperture issue of Platform Africa. And maybe it's important to mention that as a curator and educator, you're interested in the developing modes of documentary, questions of representation, and positionality in visual culture. So thanks for coming, John. And Lotte Sprengers, you're a photographer and co-head of the bachelor's program in The Hague since already 2015. You studied art education and photography at the University of the Arts in Utrecht, and then you became actively involved in both teaching and the coordination at the photography department in The Hague, where you have been teaching already since 2006 now. So alongside to your dedication to photography and your own practice as a photographer, you devoted several years to developing the department's curriculum. So you were there more or less from the beginning. Formerly, you were also co-head of the master's program, Photography and Society, at the same institution, which is also maybe good to know and important to know. So yes, I hope I mentioned all of the main features, and otherwise please just expand on that. And we're happy, thank you so much for coming, and the word is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, our idea is to make it a little bit more informal. Our idea is to have a dialogue with you, those who we cannot see. You are there, we hope so. And so we hope there's some kind of interactivity, right? And so I think...
maybe we should start to take a stock here.
Yeah.
Let's see who is in the audience. Who would respond to the question, are you a student? Okay. Okay. And who considers themselves to be a teacher? Right. Who's an organizer?
everybody.
What are you organizing?
Who is not German? Yeah. Okay. Hey, if you struggle with the language, I've been using a wonderful link in Zoom helping me with the translation all the way through the day. So I hope if you do struggle that you have access to this link because it's amazing. Oh, too bad. So this turns out to be not just a dialogue that you can sit in on or that you can participate in, but it's also an English course. That's nice.
Well, and to thank you for making it possible for us to listen in on the first discussions. Thank you. So also to thank the internationale photo scene for inviting us, and not just inviting us, but also inviting some of our students so that they can present this exhibition. Perhaps we can start off with that. Mm-hmm. You'll see some pictures hanging in the air, and we'll talk about this kind of idea of things hanging.
Shall we put the light on?
That would be great if there's a light to show.
So the light is not really good, but
yeah?
I think it's...
But maybe it's
for the
better
moment
also
it
to
is
see
better
the audience
the
and to...
pictures.
yeah, we can have the light on.
It would be fantastic. Yeah? Is it
Where's the
possible?
switch?
Where's the switch? Yes.
There will be a hard cut right now, but we'll make it.
Wow.
Hey!
Yeah, there you are.
This looks like an art space now.
Well, so this exhibition is the outcome of a field trip of our second years last semester, which means they are now third years. It's a 1-week encounter, and it talks about some of the strategies that we have in mind about methodologies of teaching and encountering and collectiveness. And so I think it would be a good idea if we could ask one of our students to come and quickly introduce this exhibition. Thank you. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. I have to talk
Yes, please.
Professional. Okay, so for this exhibition is also kind of the launch of our publication that is fresh from the printer. But basically, like in March, we came here for a week, and we are 52 students, and we all made a photo project. And the week after, we went back to nach, and then we came out with this publication in 1 week. And what do I have to say? Everyone did different things. I think it's been inspiring to see this. Everyone went to different places in Cologne, find different people, and create different landscape and character, and find different stuff. And yeah.
So it's guided a little bit. No, please stay. It's guided a little bit in the sense that people do a little bit of research beforehand. So maybe you can chat about that.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can also talk about just Donald and Yara working with you guys, setting up this.
So basically, in the moment that we arrived in Cologne, we already had a project, like a plan. So we already did a project proposal, and the teacher already accepted it. So we start with the research base. Some people didn't. Some people yes. So yeah, then from the first day we start shooting and going outside, and then during the evening there were a feedback session, and then coming back to the hostel, crying for the feedback session, and then the day after go back to photography again. And for this exhibition we worked together, 5 students, together with Yara and Donald, and we came out with the concept of textile, we came out with the choosing of the images and how to hang them.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. What do we do with all these empty chairs?
Well, I think it's a good idea that we invite some people then to come and join and have an open discussion. Maybe you can ask questions. Whoever feels they would like, all those students that were putting their hands up, maybe this is a place for you.
Anyone? It's not very scary.
Yay!
Welcome.
Maybe we can just start and then ask people as you have questions to come forward.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Shall I talk a bit about the program?
Please.
Okay. The Royal Academy of Art in The Hague has both a BA program in photography as well as an MA program. The BA consists of 4 years and the MA is 2 years. We have in the BA 200 students altogether and in the MA 30. We have a team of teachers in the BA of 50 and with an overlap there are about 10 in the MA. So that's sort of the dynamic, the scope of the program. We have a lot of international students. I think only 20% of the first year students are of Dutch origin. That makes English as our common language, where we struggle together and try to discuss photography. We have a very international team of teachers as well. If I name a few of their origins, it's South Africa, Bangladesh, Yemen, Russia, Poland, Moldavia, Slovenia, Sweden, Germany, Ukraine. So it's a very eclectic mix of people that we bring together for a certain amount of time to help them develop their photography. So if I would describe the program, I think I could describe it best as an inverted funnel. So we start quite wide and we try to narrow it down over the course of the years. And I will focus mainly on the BA when I try to explain how that sort of works. In the first year, we focus on the exploration and visual development of students. So we offer them skills in photography, in research, in writing. We offer them theoretical programs, but there's also a lot of photography assignments. It's a program that runs for 40 weeks. So that's sort of the amount of time that students spend, and it's very, very full-time. There's also a part-time equivalent where they spend only 2 days a week in the program, and that focuses very much on the core of the curriculum. We have 2 semesters, we have about 16 courses altogether, and I think the students meet around 18 different teachers in their first year. So they have a lot of input. And by the end of the first year, we ask them to decide and actually apply for either a documentary program or a fiction program. It always brings up a lot of discussion. What is documentary? What is fiction? And to be honest, it's a construct. It's a tool for us, it's a didactical approach where we say, hey, after the first year, we would like you to make a decision, and it might feel forced or it might feel constructed, but it can help you to make a decision, and it helps us to speed up the process a little bit. Because as you decide in favor of something, but also against something, and it narrows down your development a little bit. Yes, please.
I thought so. Did you ever consider to ask them a different question?
We asked them many questions, but would you have a suggestion?
No, I was just wondering whether documentary and fictional is the only juxtaposition you could think of.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So you were asking if documentary and fiction is the best way to frame a juxtaposing decision-making process.
Yes, in fact. I'm wondering whether that is an item of discussion at your academy.
It's a never-ending item of discussion.
Yeah, I want the question whether you should ask another question for dividing the students, or I like the idea of making them decide for something.
Yeah.
But you could make them decide for something between 2 different other things,
Yeah.
so to say, and that was.
Well, I think, so part of the thinking is that you give people 2 kind of streams of thinking that relates to how they think about photography. So documentary would be that they consider the world around them, they reference the world around them, and they start from that point. Fiction would mean that they consider the world inside, more internal, and they start with that point. So it's not the typical definition of documentary and fiction, but then the overlaps continuously happens, and there's this kind of disruption of what these themes really mean. And so in the third year, there's kind of cross stations. In the fourth year, there's ongoing exploration with different kinds of work. So it's certainly not the only one. And historically, I think the layout of that has been kind of nicely interwoven with also the skills and the fields where some of the teachers come from. But these things are fluid.
How about fantasy instead of fiction?
Fantasy instead of fiction. That's a really nice suggestion. Yeah.
And how do you develop afterwards? Will you talk about it a little bit more? Because that would be very interesting, because it could also be, is it then completely excluded? Because just as an example, in Lucerne we are also much more onto documentary. But then a work of Thomas is a very interesting interruption of their work, and it's I experienced it that they were really saying like, hey, it was really nice for me to work that much in a studio and try out things. We didn't do that until now in that profoundness. Yeah. So how do you proceed then?
So what we try to do in year one, we try to make them at least aware of different approaches, different methodologies of creating work. You can keep the mic. You can also take a chair.
Yeah, please come up.
So in year one, students explore different possibilities of creating work. And again, this distinction between documentary and fiction for us is very much related to a distinction between methodologies of creating work. It doesn't speak so much about its result. And very often, after graduation, you don't see that distinction very much anymore. But we focus on the how do you create work to enable students to understand that, to master that, to be able to continue to develop that also after graduation. So that is why we chose now for this distinction. But I can guarantee it's an ongoing conversation. I think in 3 weeks' time we meet again with all the teachers. We'll have another debate. And maybe it will be different next year. But let's go back to year one. So they apply, they go into a certain distinctive studies. That's mainly happening in year two. So the focus on either documentary or fiction approach exists there the most. Year two is focusing more on an in-depth research. What is that? What is my way of creating work? How do I prefer to do that? And that's why the field trip, for example, is such a nice pressure cooker that we create where there is little time. It's a strange context, you don't know the place, very often you don't speak the language, you don't have a network, and because of all these challenges, you depend on what you can do best. You fall back on the methodology of work that suits you, and you get to test it in a context that is strange, that is unknown, that might be scary, but we are there and we meet them every night and we discuss the little steps they took during the day and prepare for the next. So that's what the role of this field trip is and what this work, how this work came about. And the end of the second year, by then, we hope that they sort of feel they master a kind of work process. And then they enter into their third years. That's where the mixing starts. It's also in the work sessions, for example, so students are mixed and they meet in different settings. And it's focusing on the photographic discourse. They do a longer project, they take semester programs, and they present themselves for the very first time to an audience. So they work towards some kind of presentation that we call an intervention. It's not necessarily aiming at a white cube kind of setting, but much more towards an engagement with an audience. And that brings in the third party, the third identity we recognize in our training that we think is very important. We work with the maker, the student who makes the work. We work with the topic, what is that? What do you want to speak about? But we also recognize the receiver of the work. Who is that? And how does that receiver and what you want to achieve with that receiver inform how you create the work? So we try to have a sort of triangle there where decisions are made with awareness towards everything. Students take an internship in their third year where they have a semester time to see other people's practices, and usually that's with a photographer where they pair up with. And then they move to the fourth year that is all about profiling and positioning. Students work on something we call commissioned work, which is actually focusing very much on a collaborative project. something with someone or something outside the course, the scope of the academy, a self-initiated collaboration with a platform outside. It can be in a publication, it can be a very toegepast, applied. That's part of their exam. They also do a research paper, we call it, which very often is called a thesis, so a much more theoretical research into usually a topic they're interested in. And of course, they wrap up the program with a graduation work, a project that relates to their practice and that helps them to position themselves in the photographic field. Then they graduate, and then they're off, and then we're done.
And so I suppose while this progression from first year to fourth year happens, there's all kinds of other progressions that happen perhaps in more of a horizontal way. And one of those we can talk about as a community. And I think it's really important for us as educators, as we all would know, that photography learning is not linear, and that the school is not the only place where we learn about photography, and that photography is a continuous process that happens in many different places. And I think, so COVID came and it gave us this opportunity to rethink how we teach and who we are. And it shifted quite a few kind of ideas of hierarchies perhaps, but also about the metaphysical, right? So suddenly you had to meet in online groups, different to the physical groups that you are using or used to, which is very much like photography, right? So photography has got this virtual reality, this reality of post-photography, and then it's also got this physical reality. And I think there are questions around representation when your teacher sits in front of you on a video screen, and there's something about representation when your teacher sits in their living room looking at you in your living room. And I think this is the complications of teaching, of thinking about what is it that we are really exchanging. I think this is interesting because these things talk about kind of places of transformation. And we need to understand universities, high schools, Hochschule, as places of possible transformation. That's where we think about what the world is. And I think these questions are really critical for me because they set up these questions around how do we want to care? For whom do we want to care? How do we teach people around us to care? And so in one very important way, we are communities of caring. So photography can be situated within that, and that changes perhaps our way of thinking about photography. So one of the aspects of photography that's quite important is technology.
Yeah, you've heard a lot about this today already. We also teach a lot of technology with the aim that we learn students how to continue to adapt and to learn. Because I think the moment they graduate, everything they've learned is already not outdated, but there's new stuff coming and it's constantly coming. And in order to be ready for the future, they need to learn how to adapt and to make use of their possibilities, of the medium, what it offers, technology, rather than following it, maybe also informing it. How can you use every new unforeseen skill or trade or that's popping up? So that is how we try to also look at learning technical skills. They learn the basics. They know how to. They have a fair toolbox. They can do proper photography. But the core is to learn how to continue learning. And that's what we try to enhance. So
if you like the time when I learned photography, you know, it was all about the weight of the camera. The camera had a certain weight. And the heavier the camera was, the more important it was, the more authority it had. And as times changed, cameras became lighter, 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 lighter. And eventually they are hanging in the air. And today we call it surveillance. So photography has become so light that we can't see it anymore, but it's looking at us. And I think part of this thinking around photography is really critical for people to understand. I think it brings questions also about the gallery, the museum. Where do we want to hang our pictures? With which communities do we want to exchange and share with? And I think that's quite important, because photographs perhaps is not necessarily the only point of teaching photography, right? Perhaps it's more about the practice of photography. So the practice of photography are those rituals, those conventions, those things that start before, that continue after the photograph. It's how you position your photograph in this world that changes, that gives it meaning, and that connects it with you, but also allowing an audience that you don't know to imagine what you thought you had in mind when you took that picture. And that's the conversation that we are in, that photography is out there, it's in the air, it belongs to everybody, and we all try and make meaning out of that. And so this we that we are trying to figure out is a little bit of a difficult question then.
We is also quite important to us when it comes to teaching, the notion of we. We teach a lot in peer groups. Actually, sort of everything happens in peer groups. And they start off in a group, and we try to make sure that that group's also there still at the very end. I think students hardly ever have one-on-ones, because everything happens in the context of the group, and the role of the teacher is thereby much more defined towards being a facilitator rather than being the one who offers knowledge, more one-directional, and that is how I remember teaching was. So as a teacher, you have a different role, that of a facilitator. As a student, you have the role of being part of a community and being responsible also for that community, participating in that actively, understanding how you usually behave in a group, in a community, and how you can make use of that, or what you want to add or change in that. In that sense, a study is very, very personal, because it's a constant reflection on who are you as an individual and how do you relate or respond to the group.
I think this we is also, it's a big question, because where I come from, we is a loaded term, So when we talk about we, and I love the fact that it's included in the title, because it opens up that question. We have to think about who the we is and why there are different modes of photography. So I suppose when you grow up in a community of resources, then photography can be seen immediately as art making, meaning making, playing around, experimentation. When you grow up in another kind of community, photography is about power, surveillance, trying to express your identity because there's such an absence of that previously recorded. It becomes a tool of saying who you are in a very different way. And I think that this we is really, really important for us to dissect and understand the different resources that go over the world. We had a little bit of a discussion about this just earlier, because I think that's a really important question about one of the failures of photography, that we believe it's democratized. Everybody's got a camera, but the fact is that the institutions of photography are the ones that predict and talk about photography and its future. And so there's a question, and I invite you already to come and sit.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
And I think really
You can,
Come.
please.
Yes.
Yay.
And shall we turn out the light for the
Yeah.
last round of discussion?
Well, as soon as all the chairs are filled.
Yeah.
We need some chairs, Fredrik.
Thomas?
Come.
Please.
Or anyone who hasn't sit on one of these wonderful chairs yet.
Save your
Yeah, come.
Go on.
Don, I know you like a chair.
Donald.
So there's one
No pressure, Don.
chair. 2, 3.
That was enough. Yeah, he's making it.
And
It's
Yes,
not
please.
working.
And I want to add something too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I go first? Since I think I feel I come from a student perspective more or less. And
I think
so
the microphones are not
Can you use
working.
this one?
Hello?
This one needs.
this
Can
is
you
only
use
a
this one?
really quick remark, just to what we were saying. And this is, to me, quite valuable because I realized while you were talking about how your studies are structured, I'm studying photography and I'm engaging in a relationship with this thing. It's a process. It influences my life. And you negotiate. So you do not negotiate, but you offer a space and facilitate resources for students to find their relationship with photography. Mm-hmm. And because you spend your lifetime with it, your energy, your everything. So it's a fragile thing, and it's good to care for this sort of facilitation. And it's not to inspire students; it's more to find out what they need in order to have a stable relationship with the medium. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah. John,
sorry.
Catherine,
No, you-
please go ahead. Yeah.
No, when you were speaking of the democratized medium, does it work? No, yeah. I think it's also this, what you were just mentioning, the politics of seeing, which are so important as well to consider in my eyes, because it's true that, photography is kind of everywhere and everybody has access to it, but what do we actually do in the moment we photograph? And are we aware of these kind of power relations and really the politics of seeing that are so important? Also, I mentioned it earlier with the training data sets, for example, when it comes to categorization of humans. It's incredible when you look deeper into that. And I think these are all questions that have to be considered next to the teaching the medium itself in a way, but all these kind of framing aspects that are related very closely.
Yeah. We very much recognize this, and we don't speak so much about politics of seeing, but I think we phrase it much more around responsibility towards the receiver as well as towards the topic that you create work about, and that you take care of that relationship, and that it informs how you create your pictures, your work.
I think it always remains fragile in the sense that we live in a globalized society, and so these pictures circulate in spaces where the original intentions shift quite a bit, are consumed by different people in different ways. It's really complex to try and make sense out of it. I often find that photographers from South Africa, from Africa, how they can present their work in other spaces, it's almost another convention. It's a paradigm, because photography has got a purpose within a certain context, and that context is so important. And so going back to your observation about the idea that we are just facilitators of ideas of students, which is absolutely true. We also need to understand where our students come from and how what we try and manifest in their work makes sense back home, wherever that might be, an international case, but also what it means in terms of normal economic circumstances. So I think there's a huge accountability in that.
I have a bit of a provocative question, I'm afraid. Does the we produce pictures? I understand from what you were saying more that the we is a state of mind, kind of, as far as I understood it, or a sort of almost spiritual approach, I would say. When I look at the pictures, or when I look at most artistic pictures in an art context that are produced in a Western context, there's always an I, myself. So I would like to ask, how is this related? Because in my opinion, you need the I, the me, the myself, the individual to produce a picture, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
A relevant picture.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, certainly there's the I that makes it, and the I does this in collaboration with themselves and the world out there. So there's already the question around the source. You know, is that an I or is it wider? But I think the real catch in photography is that it's somebody else that's going to read it. And so it becomes fluid because it's now the imagination of the reader that intersects with the photograph. So we are the ontological question of serious note. Photography is very seldom just the word of the I. It's so often a broader shared experience. Yeah.
The I doesn't work without the we. There's never, isn't it? I mean,
that's true. I think
we're talking.
Back,
No.
so.
That's That's if we just get it down to one question: is do we need one person to make art or two persons? If we have two persons, you have a viewer and you have the artist. But I don't think I'm not sure if that's the we you're talking about, right? It's a different we, just me and the viewer. I mean, that's always in art. That's with any picture. Every picture is made to be seen, right? That's not the we, isn't it? Maybe I got something, Can you, Lotte? You were just jumping on the table, basically. So.
I wanted to add to John that we use the group, the peers, the community also very much to enable someone to understand how their I is. What you want to speak about is much clearer when you see other people's work. It's much more easy, as a didactical tool, it's just much more easy for students to discuss other people's work than to talk about their own work. So to enable them to discuss other people's work, secondary reflects back on their own position and they start to understand, hey, but I am actually interested in this and that. So we need the we to understand the I. Oh my goodness. No?
No?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yeah, my idea, because I like this me and I and abstract something, but for me, the whole day I'm asking myself, maybe it's a very German system question, but everybody who was invited here was either teaching on a university for applied science or an academy, but we also have like schools where you teach photography to people who want to be art teachers in schools, and I think that is also an interesting because I think we, not only us as photographers, should understand, and also people who visit schools, but also this, it appeared today before that there's also a social question, so I think we should bring understanding of photography also in schools. And from my experience, for example, I'm Katja, and together with Oliver, we are doing this anti-photo project, and we have different experiences in teaching in all kind of schools and universities. So we have been in academies and applied science schools, but also in something in Germany it's called Technische Universität, and there you teach teachers. And often they have it's photography besides all these other kind of arts, and it's very poorly equipped, and I think that would be more important to also teach photography in these schools. And then photography could also be taught in schools to kids and teenagers, because I think that's a very important understanding of being literate and understanding photography and images. And that's maybe also a question to everybody who talked today, and also Heide maybe and the Fotoszene team. Where are the teachers who educate teachers in school?
Yeah, I think if I can respond, I think that visual literacy is key to our society at the moment, more and more and more and more. We cannot think about teaching history without showing pictures of history. We can't think about geography without showing pictures. So I think that has got a real repercussion also for teaching what we believe is photography. So the old question around if we remove the word photographer from what we teach, what is it that we are teaching? Because essentially we can start to think, and I think Don can speak about this, is that many of the students land up being economists, geographers, historians through photography. And I think that this is something that for me is increasingly more important, this idea of collective research process, this idea that you are one of many makers developing knowledge, making knowledge, and that photography has got a really critical role at the moment to lead that. And so going back to this idea of visual literacy, we need to think about how we teach kids and what are the tools for their understanding and management of image.
I would just quickly like to answer the I and we question in a definite manner, just for one particular thing. When we talk about generative adversarial networks, which have been addressed today, a couple of examples, there might be like special cases when those find application in art creation, where you specifically mentioned one student that programmed it himself and then basically fed it with his own work, and then there was like a certain outcome. So here we could argue that there is definitely an I involved, but I think in generally how those networks are applied on the vast majority of cases, there's always going to be a we of programmers who actually set it up. There's going to be a large we of like billions of images that are like largely without permission are being used to train the set. So there's like a large and definite we, at least within the vast majority of applications of those networks. With like conventional art making, we might have like a longer discussion about it, but I think in this specific area that becomes more and more prevalent and important,
Absolutely.
there's a definite we.
Yes, and not to forget all the pictures that were taken for the data sets, which are 10 millions, which are all the I's and we's, if we want to stay in this terminology, yeah, that carry their own history.
Maybe it's a problem of authorship, which we have to question a little bit more, because we have our concept of photography is based also on other things that we still believe in, that it has to be one person taking a photo, which is it's past already, right? Because there's many more modes of taking photographs. So if authorship is dissolving, then yes, what is next? What is photography then if authorship is dissolved?
Sorry, I'll go back to, oops, I wanted to be at that one.
That's authorship. That's authorship.
I still think maybe, or that was just basically a question in the air, but what I just discovered while you were talking was the idea of photography being a mode of participating in a situation. So you relate somehow to that situation, and photography helps you doing so. So it's a process, and that's what I just somehow understood. And this participating and also in somehow relating, I think that's a meaning creating process, but not in terms of there's meaning in an image, but meaning as in it's worth it doing it. It's valuable because it's a participation in what happens somehow. That's also something which I kind of heard somehow in between, but maybe it's just my way of wanting to see it. So because I care about it. But yeah.
Maybe I don't think I'm mistaken here. There is no art without authorship, I would say. Good. If we let's go strong statement. If we go back, okay, let's say it differently. I'd say if we go back to Duchamp, right? Duchamp. He takes the urinoir, puts it in a different context. That's how I understand that's authorship. Maybe let's say there's a statement that something is art. Yes, so for something to be art, you need a statement that there is art, and for that, who do you want to ask? An AI? This is what distinguishes us from the AI. We can make the statement, an AI can't. A chimpanzee can't. So that's...
Wait another year.
Sorry? Yes. Okay. But at this point, I would say we can talk about individual authorship. We can talk also about collective authorship. But we can very much talk about different concepts of authorship, and that there are a lot or millions of authors in one work in a certain way. We can do that. But I don't think that we can talk about art without authorship in Duchamp's sense. I don't think we can do that.
Well, by coincidence, two pictures next to each other might appear that is quite interestingly together, that asks a certain question. And so at that moment, the source is coincidence. I'm thinking about that in the way that we live in a complicated space. I mean, like, it used to be the newspaper with an advert competing with the main picture on the front page, and then now on the screen there's like all these other pictures that are competing. For me, that's it can be art, how these things come together, because I can read it as such. So yeah, it's just to complicate it.
But sorry, you can read everything as art.
Yes.
Even these flowers here.
Yes.
So I would like to...
That's not the point.
Sorry. I would like to go back to the whole process of participation. So I came to Germany with a scholarship, and I'm a part of a wave of people from Nicaragua who are emigrating to different countries in the so-called first world via academia. And we are currently going through a process of dictatorship that comes with the whole violence of disappearance. And in the 21st century, we are seeing how photography is becoming a vessel in which we can have like the hope of justice. I can citate one of my dear friends, Dr. Emilia Yang, currently teaching in Chicago. She has a project called the Museum of Memory, Love and Do Not Forget, that honors many of the fatal victims of the dictatorship. Families that won't have justice this year, next year, in 5 years, we don't know when or if justice will arrive. And people, these families, just by having like a reservoir of their demands, of having like the memory of their loved one preserved, they are, in a way, getting a little bit of the justice that it's been denied. So it's very funny how, I mean, it's not funny, it's tragic, but I find very interesting how in Europe and the USA, like, there's this questioning about institutions, about museums, what they mean, what their value is, or if they should be dismantled, if they should be like more democratized. And in a way, it's for us, for the ones that are taking academia as a way of like being heard, it's very interesting that we are like using these formats. I mean, we have this collection of images and demands and call it a museum, even though it doesn't have walls and it's not a room. And I feel that, I mean, this Dr. Yang is not a photographer. She collaborated with like a couple of photographers in Nicaragua to build this museum. And I feel that it's very interesting that it's another angle that goes beyond like authorship and what is photography and being discussed today. I mean, I don't want to like ruin the mood. Sorry. But it's an angle that I find very interesting, and it's something that personally in my life puts me between two worlds, because as an immigrant, I live in two places at the same time. And I'm not engaged in political work right now in my studium, and my project doesn't have anything to do with it, but I find very interesting to be pulled together in these two directions, that we have photography in Germany being this thing that people, it's very they're very guarded about being photographed. And then you have like my country, in which you can pull up your camera and people are dying to tell their story. So it's just very interesting to have like these two cultures, to have these two situations, being in a very democratic country, being in a country that has overcome the kind of problems that my country is currently in, and to have photography as something that is in the middle of technology, of justice, of belief, like narrative, being able to be so many things at the same time.
Okay. Thank you for that, because it was really nice to hear. Because I think one thing that we tend to sort of dwell upon, certainly within, say, the broader institution of photography, is, say, the broken promises of photography. And you speak about actually the promise of photography. And one thing that we do try to stress, perhaps it's more so in our master's program, the Photography and Society program, is exactly what you're talking about, that photography in this sense can be not ameliorative, not that it solves anything, but it actually offers possibilities and alternatives to, say, the singular trajectory that is sort of, predisposed for us. So in which ways, in which worlds, in which possibilities do we actually imagine in and through and with photography? So it's not even about, say, the object of the image, but it's about, say, the transmission or the relations of photography. It's about the sort of sitting upon and within the potentials that actually lie in wait and actually can be quite activated. So photography, for us and for me, it's much more than just, say, self-expression, but it can be evidence, it can be witness, it can be documentative, it can be almost banal as well. But what it mostly, I think, can afford us is exactly what you're saying, is that there are means and ways to offer, as you say, justice, possibilities, representation, that I would say transcend questions of authorship or artistry. In fact, it is just about the relational sort of propagation and possibilities that a photograph can offer. So I'm very glad to hear that, so thank you.
And I'm gonna leave right now because I'm like, I feel in the spot.
I think I think to add to that, there's this ongoing possibility also of the archive, something that in the next few days will also be discussed, which I think brings so many possibilities to look into what was mentioned. Yeah.
I would like also, sorry, I just had a look on your screen and I saw about photography as practice, and I wanted to come back to that as well. I think that this notion of photography as a practice is such an important aspect, and also the term of process, like thinking in terms of process, not about results or anything else, but all what you described and what I think is so important, this peer-to-peer, the feeling of we, like this whole process, what you learn in between, like in doing this and in practicing this, that is the important part in my eyes, which is not only related to photography, but which is closely, of course, which is how do we stand in the world, and photography is a medium that is a relation to the world, especially when it's about telling stories, for example, but also in work like yours, and I think this is very important, and that should be also reflected in the curricula in a way, that it's about process.
I think at a certain moment we need to start to think about photographs as placeholders for this practice that we are busy with. And it's imminent, right? So it's we already have this idea of other people using my photographs to show something else, and so the next generation. I think it's also this question around authorship. The next generation will use images as a way of practice, as a way of thinking together with other people about the world, rather than necessarily the first-hand knowledge that it holds.
And that might be, I think, the first transition we try to provoke with our students when they come in. I think the focus on results is very, very high. That's what society is geared towards. Exactly. So to turn that around and to try to move away from that focus on results and see what happens before that, and can we discuss and and unravel that to understand it better before we start to see what comes of it. But it does help. Like, if you can do that, you can take a step towards offering a safer setting to develop, because in that process so many things can happen. It can go right, it can go wrong. But once you open that up, and once you stop to discuss the result and with like or dislike as your wording, the conversation shifts. And that is often very pleasant to notice in their first years, we hope, that we can turn this around. Yeah.
Hey guys, super nice, super thank you to all of you. It was really amazing to hear all of you, your statements, and hear about your different approach. I think it's time to open the stage to the audience, or to pull down the stage and have a drink, listen to some music, and just get together. And please stay here, please all stay here, and let's have a nice evening. Thank you very much. It was super interesting to hear not only about